Leader for the opposition has a point of privilege.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I am rising on a very serious matter today. As you know, I have provided notice of a question of privilege concerning the Speaker's public participation in partisan events over this past weekend. I do note that in his statement earlier today, the Speaker has indicated that he is recusing himself from this matter, which clearly touches upon him and his conduct, and that he has indicated that he will follow the practices laid down in your October 19th, 2023 ruling concerning recusals by the Speaker, found at page 17, 635 of the debates. I recognize that in some instances, complaints about the Speaker, but more particularly those concerning rulings, should proceed by way of a motion placed on notice. But I believe the current circumstances amount to such a breach of the impartiality of the Chair that it warrants priority consideration by the House immediately. In Saturday morning's Globe and Mail, an article entitled "John Fraser Finishes His Time as Interim Ontario Liberal Leader as Party Elects Permanent Replacement," quote, written by Laura Stone, rather remarkably quotes the Speaker. Let me read the relevant paragraph. Quote, "He's demonstrated so much calm and conviction and resolve and determination, and he's held it all together at a very challenging time for our party," end quote. The Speaker of the House of Commons first met Mr. Fraser in 1989 while working in Ottawa. The article continues. He said, "Mr. Fraser will be remembered for experience, good judgment, and a real passion and authenticity," end quote. Who exactly is our party, Mr. Deputy Speaker? In any event, the partisan engagement didn't stop there. That afternoon, he appeared via video at the leadership election for the Ontario Liberal Party. Here is a sample of what he had to say in his 2-minute video greetings as part of the tribute to Mr. Fraser. Quote, "And boy, did we have fun. We had a lot of fun together through the Ottawa South Liberal Association, through Liberal Party politics, by helping Dalton McGuinty get elected. This was really a seminal part of my life. When I think of the opportunities that I have now as being Speaker of the House of Commons, it's because of people like John." These remarks were introduced to the Liberal Convention as, quote, "a message from the Speaker of the House of Commons of Canada, un message du Président de la Chambre des Communes du Canada."
Wow.
He made these remarks from the Speaker's office in the West Bloc while dressed in his Speaker's robes. As bad as it would have been to appear at a party convention at all, it might have at least been a little bit different if he had been introduced as the member for Hull Elmer, or wore a suit or a sweater, while standing in front of a scenic backdrop in his riding. But he wasn't. He was standing there in the full non-partisan trappings of his non-partisan office, paying a partisan tribute to a partisan friend at a partisan event. Now, I recognize that Mr. Fraser tweeted yesterday that there could have been some confusion about what the Speaker's office was told about where the remarks were to be shown, but it doesn't change one iota about the fact that he was dressed in his Speaker's gowns, standing in the Speaker's office, making a partisan tribute video to be viewed somewhere. Similarly, Mr. Fraser's tweet doesn't address the Globe and Mail interview, which I just read, where he offered partisan praise for Mr. Fraser. If you do an interview with the Globe, quite frankly, you should expect to see your comments printed and posted for all to see. This conduct is simply unacceptable. It defies all long-standing traditions and expectations attached to the high office of Speaker. Late yesterday afternoon, the Speaker's office released a statement in his defense claiming, quote, "The Speaker acknowledges how this message could have been perceived," end quote. Exactly, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Perception is everything. House of Commons Procedure and Practice 3rd edition explains at page 323, quote, "The Speaker embodies the power and authority of the office, strengthened by rule and precedent. He or she must at all times show, and be seen to show, the impartiality required to sustain the trust and goodwill of the House," end quote. Continuing on to the next page, we read, quote, "In order to protect the impartiality of the office, the Speaker abstains from all partisan political activity. For example, by not attending caucus meetings, does not participate in debates and votes only in the event of an equality of voices, normally referred to as the casting vote of the chair. Beauchene's Parliamentary Rules and Forms, 6th edition, adds at citation 168.1, quote, "The chief characteristics attaching to the office of Speaker in the House of Commons are authority and impartiality. Yeah. Confidence in the impartiality of the Speaker is an indispensable condition of the successful working of procedure. And many conventions exist which have as their object not only to ensure the impartiality of the Speaker, but also to ensure that there is a general recognition of the Speaker's impartiality," end quote. That passage originates from the United Kingdom's Parliamentary Bible, Erskine May, and can be found virtually word for word in its 25th edition at paragraph 4.23. Beauchene's continues at citation 168.2, quote, "In order to ensure complete impartiality, the Speaker has usually relinquished all affiliation with any parliamentary party. The Speaker does not attend any party caucus, nor take part in any outside partisan political activity," end quote. As a former Speaker myself, I understand completely what this means because I lived it for 4.5 years. That's why I was absolutely flabbergasted when a photo of his participation at the Liberal Convention was first drawn to my attention. I am still, 48 hours later, deeply appalled and, frankly, deeply offended. Having served in the chair, I wholeheartedly appreciate that speakers do not arrive there through some form of immaculate conception. Speakers have all been politicians before being elected to the chair, and some of us have even gone on to further partisan service after our tenure in the chair. Bosk and Gagnon acknowledge this point at page 314, quote, "The Speaker has almost always been elected from among the members of the governing party, and although the Speaker eschews partisan political activity, he or she does not make a complete break. When running for re-election, incumbent speakers are usually careful to avoid partisan statements that might prejudice their perceived impartiality in the future." The impartiality of the Speaker is not unique to our federal parliament. Indeed, it is a common sentiment throughout the Commonwealth. In addition to the authority I already referenced from the UK, where of course the Speaker actually leaves partisan politics for the rest of his or her life, let me cite a few others for the Chair's consideration. Parliamentary Practice in New Zealand, 4th edition, also known as McGee, at page 78, advises that, quote, "The member who is elected Speaker does not thereby become a non-party member of Parliament. However, the Speaker does not play a politically partisan role and exercises restraint in the speeches or comments he or she makes outside the House. The Speaker must be prepared to assert an independence from the government to ensure that the rights of all sides of the House are protected in the course of the parliamentary process," end quote. The Indian Lok Sabha's Practice and Procedure of Parliament, 7th edition, adds at page 107, quote, "While the Speaker stands on party ticket for his election to the House, he may or may not continue to be the member of his party after his election as Speaker. Even when he does not sever connections with his party, he has refrained from attending any party meeting. However, a convention has more or less developed at the Union for the Speaker to disassociate himself from his party," end quote. The same text observes at page 306 that, quote, "Office of the Speaker, Lok Sabha, is a constitutional office and enjoys exalted status in our democratic setup. Though it is not necessary for the Speaker under the Constitution or the rules of procedure to sever his connections with the political party to which he belongs, once he is elected to the office, he, while conducting the House, nevertheless acts in totally impartial manner. Impartiality is therefore an integral attribute vis-a-vis the office of the Speaker," end quote. Turning back closer to Ottawa, Parliamentary Procedure in Quebec, 3rd edition, makes this astute point at page 132. Quote, "While the legitimacy of the chair stems primarily from the rules that govern the selection process, the impartiality of the chair is essentially determined by the attitude adopted by the President in the exercise of the functions of office. Of course, the rules of parliamentary procedure state that the President does not belong to any parliamentary group, does not participate in any of the Assembly's debates, and votes only to break a tie. But it is the manner in which the incumbent oversees the proceedings and follows those rules that determines whether actual impartiality and the appearance of impartiality are maintained." The universally expressed point here is that while the Speaker is vested with the responsibilities of being the Speaker, he is expected to check his partisanship at the door. It can be difficult, but it must be done. In a recent interview on CTV Question Period, The Speaker claimed it took, quote, all of 60 seconds to shed his decades of liberal sensibilities and political bias upon becoming Speaker. This weekend's events call that into doubt. Yesterday, the Speaker's office said he would be more, quote, diligent going forward. But the House needed his total and complete diligence since day one. This also isn't the first communications challenge where diligence would have been helpful during his brief tenure as Speaker. Recalling how a teenage blogger had noticed 10 days before this House about a procedural decision he had taken. About 35 years ago, he was one of the pages upon whom this House truly relies in order to function smoothly. Back when he was a page, had he participated at openly partisan events, he likely would have been fired. What message does this send to today's pages that the Speaker of the House, the one who is supposed to embody impartiality and devotion to the whole House, can be involved in political party conventions? This conduct, in my view, should be treated as a prima facie contempt of the House. Bosque and Gagnon explain at page 60, any conduct which offends the authority or dignity of the House, even though no breach of any specific privilege may have been committed, is referred to as a contempt of the House. Contempt may be an act or an omission. It does not have to actually obstruct or impede the House or a member. It merely has to have the tendency to produce such results. At page 81, they continue, quote, thus, the House also claims the right to punish, as a contempt, any action which, though not a breach of a specific privilege, tends to obstruct or impede the House in the performance of its functions, obstructs or impedes any member or officer of the House in the discharge of the duties, or is an offence against the authority or dignity of the House. The House of Commons enjoys very wide latitude in maintaining its dignity and authority through the exercise of its contempt power. In other words, the House may consider any misconduct to be contempt and may deal with it accordingly. This area of parliamentary law is therefore extremely fluid and most valuable for the Commons to be able to meet novel situations, end quote. There are no precedents in our House, nor are there any obvious precedents from our sister parliaments which are directly on point for the issue I raised today, possibly because no Speaker in the major Commonwealth parliaments has been so bold as to participate openly at partisan events, and certainly not doing so distinctly and visibly as the Speaker.
Wow.
But that is, as I just explained, not a barrier. There is, however, one ruling from Mr. Speaker Fraser, in front of whose chair he once stood as a page, which I think is strongly persuasive in these circumstances. In 1993, the then Deputy Speaker, André Champagne, had agreed to act as the co-chair of her party's convention. A question of privilege was raised, arguing that her decision amounted to a contempt of the House because it affected the appearance of impartiality attached to her office. Now, she was the Deputy Speaker. Mr. Speaker Fraser ruled on March 9, 1993, at page 16,685 of the debates, that that situation did not amount to a prima facie case of privilege because, quote, I have some difficulty in agreeing with the honourable member for Cape Breton East Richmond that the Deputy Speaker is cloaked with the same exigencies that are expected of the Speaker himself or herself. And I am deliberately careful in not extending such a responsibility by way of ex cathedra comments in this decision, end quote. This ruling, I believe, stands for the proposition that the Speaker's participation at a partisan convention would, on the other hand, have amounted to a prima facie contempt in Mr. Speaker Fraser's view. He's clearly saying in that ruling that the expectations and the very high bar set upon the Speaker did not apply to the Deputy Speaker, but in making that explanation, he acknowledges and reinforces the idea that it would be wholly inappropriate for the Speaker to do what the Deputy Speaker did in that situation. Many of our rules and practices here operate on a binary basis. For example, we cannot call a colleague a liar because everyone is presumed to speak the truth. Therefore, every member has a corresponding obligation to tell the truth in the House. Similarly, the rulings of the Speaker and any comments on the partisan implications they may carry would be impermissible. That is because the House is entitled to assume the Speaker will be wholly nonpartisan while holding that office. McGee sums up the point well at page 79, quote, the Speaker's exalted position and the consequent constraints it imposes require members to treat the Speaker or any other temporary occupant of the Speaker's chair with respect and deference, end quote. If the Speaker openly engages in partisan conduct, it opens the door to public analysis of any partisan motivations underlying his rulings. And I can assure you that despite a mere 2 months in the chair, that would not be a difficult feat. Australia's House of Representatives Practice 7th edition at page 168 articulates the point well. Quote, "The Speaker must show impartiality in the chamber above all else. A Speaker should give a completely objective interpretation of standing orders and precedents and should give the same reprimand for the same offence whether the member is of the government or the opposition. Members are entitled to expect that, even though politically affiliated, the Speaker will carry out his or her functions impartially. Likewise, a Speaker is entitled to expect support from all members regardless of their party." End quote. After this weekend's events, the implied contract between the Speaker and the House, which relies on a mutual trust, has been broken. It will be very difficult for members to retain trust in a Speaker who engages in partisan activities. As Bosque and Gagnon wrote in the very first citation I offered, quote, "He or she must at all times show and be seen to show the impartiality required to sustain the trust and goodwill of the House." End quote. Should I be permitted to present my privilege motion, I will propose that the House denounce the Speaker's public participation in partisan events and accordingly ask the Procedure and House Affairs Committee to recommend an appropriate remedy for this utterly unprecedented and completely avoidable problem. I just want to address a few other points in light of the Speaker's statement earlier today. First of all, many members of Parliament find themselves in the Speaker's chair after some time demonstrating their impartiality or nonpartisanship. Often someone has served as the Assistant Deputy or Deputy Speaker and shed some of the partisanship that we often come to this place as newly elected MPs. In the case of the current Speaker, after being the former President of the Liberal Party and the Prime Minister's own Parliamentary Secretary, he entered into the chair with a great deal of partisanship still surrounding him. So it would be incumbent upon him to go the extra mile, go beyond what any normal Speaker or a Speaker elected under normal circumstances would go through. He would have to set the bar even higher for himself, knowing that he has come so quickly from hyper-partisan activities. To be president of a party is not just normal partisanship. To be the Prime Minister's own Parliamentary Secretary, obviously, establishes a very close relationship between the leader of the Liberal Party, the leader of the Prime Minister of Canada, and in taking on the role where he is now called upon to defend the rights and privileges of each individual MP, members will have to, it would take a conscious effort for members to set aside his recent partisanship. One of his first interventions in this House, upon being elected as Speaker, was to accuse another Member of Parliament, a female Member of Parliament from the NDP, of exaggerating her injuries when she was elbowed in the chest by the Prime Minister. So right there you can see an immediate reaction to defend the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Now we're being asked to accept his rulings. We're being asked to accept his rulings without any doubts about partisanship or bias. Just recently, we had a situation that was very difficult for many members to understand. The Speaker ordered the Conservative member from Miramichi not just to withdraw comments, but to actually apologize in the chamber for making an association between a political party and an odious entity abroad that is conducting horrible activities, namely Hamas. A few days later, the government House leader made a very similar accusation against Conservative MPs, and in that situation, the Speaker did not order an apology, saying that he considered the matter settled. So in that moment, we are asked to accept that is the Speaker's ruling based on precedent, based on convention, based on a thorough understanding, an unbiased understanding of the rules. And then we see him just a few days later giving remarks to the Liberal Convention. I do have a couple more points based on the Speaker's statements today. He said he didn't know where it was going to be broadcast. Well, as we pointed out, he did give that interview to the Globe. Obviously, that was going to be printed in the Globe and Mail.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I've already covered the fact that he was wearing his robes in his office. But I also point out that John Fraser's not retiring. He's just leaving his role as interim leader and going back into partisan activities.
Really?
So, yes, he's still going to be an MPP. And despite the fact that the Speaker and Mr. Fraser might be close acquaintances, might think fondly of each other, it's not like John Fraser was filling a nonpartisan role. He was playing a very partisan role in partisan politics at the provincial level in Ontario.
That's ridiculous.
So the House might decide that it would like to see any correspondence between the Speaker's office, the Speaker himself, Mr. John Fraser, the Liberal Party of Ontario, the convention organizers. We might decide collectively as the House or the Procedure and House Affairs Committee that they would like to see the correspondence to determine if that is in fact accurate. So, Mr. Speaker, I see that you are starting to give me a signal that you'd like me to wrap this up. So I just will say that because of the seriousness of this issue, I would urge the Chair to rule immediately and invite you, if necessary, to suspend the sitting, to take counsel from the clerks, and to prepare your ruling. So thank you for listening, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I do believe there are other members who would like to intervene, so I would like to reserve the right. If there are other comments made from other parties, I may seek the floor again just to offer my reflections on those commentaries.
Thank you very much for that. I know there's a number of people interested in talking about this, and what I'm going to do is I'll give the other parties an opportunity to speak to it, and then I'll go to I think the member for Calgary-Nose Hill is interested. I think l'honorable député de La Prairie.
The honourable member for La Prairie, London Fanshawe.
We'll do that again. Saskatoon University. Anyway, well, we've got a number of people that are interested in speaking to this. So I need to remind people of the House, that colleagues, to keep it to the particulars of the standing orders as closely as possible. I mean, we can relitigate this on a number of occasions, but we do want to keep concise to this as much as we can. L'honorable député de La Prairie.
The honourable member for La Prairie. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the current Speaker of the House took this position after the resignation of the previous Speaker, who had committed a serious mistake in judgment. So that was a sensitive time. The current Speaker was a very partisan Member of Parliament. We can all agree on that, more or less all of us. But the Bloc Québécois stance at the time was that we wanted to give him a chance. Whatever type of member you may be before becoming Speaker, once one becomes Speaker, one should have the chance to prove oneself, to prove that one can be impartial. And in my speech, when I spoke for a few minutes in the House after the Speaker's election, I congratulated the Speaker, and I said to him that I looked forward to seeing him put on his cloak of impartiality, which is necessary and absolutely essential to be a Speaker. Now, what are the facts here, Mr. Speaker? The leader of the Conservative Party clearly explained the facts, and I will come back on a few points very quickly, if you'll allow it. So the Speaker was in his position as Speaker, dressed as Speaker, in the office of the Speaker of the House of Commons when the events occurred, and the Speaker was using the resources of the Speaker's office of the House of Commons, but this was a clearly partisan event. Now, I will quote the 2017 House Rules and Procedures. In order to guarantee the impartiality of their office, the Speaker must abstain from all partisanship and partisan politics. Thus, we have a huge problem. The Speaker of the House said that we weren't supposed to find out about it. But that's concerning, Mr. Speaker, because we did find out about it. Were there other events that we haven't found out about? Was that just the tip of the iceberg? So these are the questions we're asking ourselves. And it's, in fact, inappropriate that we have to even ask ourselves these questions when we think about the speakership and the importance of the chair. The chair and the Speaker are essential for our institutions. We need to have trust and confidence in the Speaker. We don't want to have to ask ourselves questions like, is this for the good of democracy? Is this for the good of the House? Or is this in the best interests of the government? We don't want to have to ask those questions. On November 29th, our leader asked a question to the Prime Minister, and the Speaker ruled the question non-relevant, non-pertinent, because according to the Speaker, it did not relate to the administration of government or public office, and we raised a point of order on that. We would like to believe that that was a mistake. We hope that that was simply a mistake, and in fact, the Speaker admitted that it was a mistake. So now, how should we proceed, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, the Speaker must be above partisanship to make sure that Parliament functions well. That's what Canadians expect. We need to work in the best interests of Canadians at all times. And we shouldn't let things drag on. We shouldn't let things deteriorate, because that can deteriorate the trust that we have in the chair, which thus decreases the effectiveness and efficiency of Parliament. And as you may agree, Mr. Speaker, the climate in the House of Commons can be very tense. The Speaker must possess two essential qualities. First, impartiality, and second, flawless judgment. But unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the current Speaker has demonstrated that he has neither of those two essential qualities. That was clear after what occurred this weekend, and that's why the Bloc calls on the Speaker to resign as soon as possible.
To a couple more interventions, the Honourable Member for London Fanshawe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Certainly the NDP, we appreciate the official opposition House Leader raising this important question of privilege. And I just wanted to state that our House Leader, the member for New Westminster Burnaby, will be addressing this very, very serious issue after question period when he returns. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank the Honourable member for that. So maybe to take a second round of this. The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in terms of your deliberations on this matter, I think it's very important to put on the record the entirety of what was contained in the Speaker's video. He said this: "You were the Steinberg's manager out in the West End. I was this young little kid, while you were young too, who was working for John Manley. And we struck up a great friendship. Me, Linda, your kids, Julie, we all just hung out. You guys were a real inspiration to Julie and me when we were just getting together, getting married. You and Linda gave us some great advice, great hope, a lot of love. When we started having children, we turned to look at your family and how active you and Linda were in terms of getting things on them. Boy, did we have fun. We had a lot of fun together through the Ottawa South Liberal Association, through Liberal Party politics, by helping Dalton McGuinty get elected. This was a real seminal part of my life, and when I think of the opportunities I have now as being the Speaker of the House of Commons, it's because of people like Linda and John, especially you, John, the person that I am today. Of course, that could be, a scary thing, and I'm sorry to put that burden on you, but only the good parts. Only the good parts are really due to you, John. It's anybody can ask you to do something once, and that's fine, because when they ask you to do something twice, it's because they really like you. They really respect you, and they think you're a really great person. I know that, and I've known that for well over 30 years. So thank you, John, for all the work that you've done for the people of Ontario and the people of Canada. So, Mr. Speaker, in light of the Speaker's statement this morning, which had the tone of downplaying the severity of this action, I'd like to put on the record the ways that the Speaker shattered the impartiality he has sworn to uphold in what I believe, in tone and in content, is an endorsement video for a sitting Liberal parliamentarian. So, as the leader of the House Leader for my party, the Conservatives, said earlier, he made this video and the statement in the Speaker's robes in the Speaker's office for a video to be played at the Ontario Liberal Party Convention. It was recorded for a partisan political convention. In its tone and content, heaping effusive praise on a sitting partisan legislator at a political convention. It amounted to be an endorsement video. Mr. Fraser is a sitting Liberal member of the Ontario Provincial Legislature, and he's planning on running again. The Speaker talked about how fun partaking Liberal political activities were while in his robe in the Speaker's office. He referenced how much fun the Ottawa South Liberal Association is. He referenced getting former Liberal Premier Dalton McGuinty elected was. He talked about participating in Liberal Party politics. So there are a couple other things that my colleague did not mention that I think you should take into consideration in your ruling. For him to say this morning or in the media that he didn't know what this was for is utterly preposterous. It's utterly preposterous. That in and of itself is an affront to the House. It shows the same bad judgment of the previous Speaker in allowing a Nazi to be feted in this place. There is no way that 3 layers of staff in the Speaker's office, at the Ontario Liberal Convention, did not know what this was for, and it is actually preposterous to suggest that it was otherwise. The other thing is that this is a pattern of behavior. The argument he didn't know was actually an argument he made in this Parliament when he was the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, and I want to read into the record because this is important. I want the argument of he needs to exercise better diligence, that has been used twice before. My colleague mentioned one, I want to mention the other, and it's from a CBC article entitled Conflict of Interest Ethics Commissioner Mario Dion calls for ethics training in the wake of latest breach. The Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner is recommending that all federal ministers and parliamentary secretaries report to his office for training after the current Speaker became the latest high-profile Liberal to violate the Conflict of Interest Acts. So the article's Speaker, and I encourage you to read it, talks about the ethics violation that the now Speaker found himself in that role. And then the former Conflict of Interest Commissioner said this: being dual-hatted does not mean the Speaker can circumvent the rules of the Act by simply wearing his MP hat. And the article goes on to state that, like, it's preposterous to say that a seasoned parliamentarian did not know. So what the now Speaker said in this article was he apologized for his, quote, unintentional error and said, I will redouble my efforts to be more diligent in the future. Where have we heard this before? We heard it when he said, oh, I'll be more diligent, when he gave information that should have gone to this House to a teenage blogger. So this is now twice. So, Mr. Speaker, I encourage you to look at this statement this morning in this lens. This is a pattern of behavior, and I have to close with this. This speech was broadcasted on TVO. So it's not just us that were affected here. Anybody who was watching this broadcast would have seen the Speaker of the House of Commons in his office, in his robes, giving a partisan speech. That's an affront not just to the people in this House, but to every person we represent. And why? I want to echo what the Bloc House leader said, Speaker. We need to make this place work. And if every single time we are rightly, I think, questioning the Speaker's impartiality because of a pattern of behavior where it's like, oh, I didn't know, or, well, I'll be more diligent in the future, democracy is eroded. This place is eroded. This place has to work. And now we have a very serious question. I want to read to you, in closing, the pages in this place, their terms of employment. It's posted on the Parliament website. The House of Commons administration is a nonpartisan workforce where respect, support, and promotion of democratic processes are an organizational value. Pages may not participate in any activities, including on social media, that are politically partisan or that could give rise to the perception that they could not perform their duties impartially. What kind of an example is the Speaker setting to our pages if he's wearing his robes out? What would happen if they wore their robes out to some sort of political convention? This is also about setting an example for our youth. This is such a serious issue. The House of Commons proceedings, as my colleague said, should not be proceeding without a ruling on this matter. And this is very, very serious, very disappointing, and I cannot believe we are here again 2 months after a Nazi was feted in the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank the honourable member for that intervention. L'honorable député de Mégantic-Lérable.
The honourable member for Mégantic-Lérable. I hope everyone can try to bring new points to bear. The honourable member for Mégantic-Lérable. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I, in turn, would like to express myself on this very serious issue so that people at home watching in Quebec and in French-speaking communities all across Canada, so that they can understand what this issue is all about. As you know, we're dealing with a question of privilege today about the public activities of the Speaker of the House at a partisan event over the course of the last weekend. And the Speaker himself talked about recusing himself from the discussion of this very sensitive issue, and I hope he'll continue to do that. We asked, as part of this question of privilege, to have this matter referred to the Procedure Committee of the House to look at what happened and how it can be remedied. And we're also asking the Speaker to resign. So this is a very serious issue that warrants very serious consideration. Words matter, Mr. Speaker. Words and acts matter. And allow me to quote the member for Hull Aylmer from before he became the Speaker. In a speech he himself made here in the House before all of his colleagues and all Canadians. Before the vote, all the candidates made a little speech in order to garner the support of their fellow members of Parliament. So the member for Hull Aylmer made an appeal for respect, and he said the words we use matter, symbols matter, and I know this keenly. Mr. Speaker, that is very meaningful, what he said, given what happened this weekend. And as reported by the Globe and Mail, and we also subsequently were able to see on social media, and it's being repeated all over the place in all the media today. So we have to go back over what happened. On Saturday, there was an article in the Globe and Mail about John Fraser ending his term as acting leader of the Liberal Party of Ontario as they were choosing a new permanent leader. And allow me to read the final paragraph fully. I'm going to translate this on the fly, but the article said in the last paragraph that the member for Hull Aylmer, the Speaker, he was talking about Mr. Fraser, and he said he was a very calm individual, a man of conviction, determination, and so on. He was at the helm at a very difficult time for our party. And allow me to repeat that last part because it's very important for what comes next. He said he held strong through tough times for our party. So I refer to our statement of the facts. The president that the Speaker made as the House opened this morning. He said, and I quote, talking about the video, he said it was broadcast at a convention of a party that I'm not a member of, in a province that I don't live in, and in a jurisdiction where I haven't been able to vote for over 30 years. That is what the Speaker said this morning when the House opened, just after the doors were opened. But in his video, which was broadcast and many Canadians have seen, this is what he said precisely. He said Mr. Fraser had... And the Speaker was in his robes, in his office. He said Mr. Fraser was a very calm individual with a lot of conviction and determination, and he held strong during tough times for our party. Mr. Speaker, that's the exact opposite of what the Speaker said this morning in the House, the member for Hull Aylmer. Who is our party? Who's he referring to? Whatever the case, the video went further. The Speaker on the video took part in the election of the new leader of the Liberal Party of Ontario. Here's an excerpt of what he said in the video. And it's a 2-minute long video, which was a tribute being paid to Mr. Fraser. He said, and we had fun together in the Liberal Association of Ottawa South, and we were helping Dalton McGuinty get elected. It was a turning point in my life when I think of all the opportunities I've had since then. Now, as Speaker of the House of Commons, it's thanks to people like John and Linda, especially John, it's thanks to you that I am the person I am today. End quote. So once again, Mr. Speaker, the Speaker of the House repeated many times his affiliation with the Liberal brand, and he was dressed in his Speaker's robes in his Speaker's office, and probably with the resources of the House of Commons involved. And for those watching, this was shown at the Ontario Liberal Convention, and it was entitled A Message from the Speaker of the House of Commons of Canada. He made those remarks from the Speaker's office in West Bloc, as I said, and participating in a political convention in and of itself would appear ill-advised and inappropriate for a person who is expected to display non-partisanship at all times. Some would say the situation might have been different if the member for Hull Aylmer had been wearing jeans and in his backyard without using the House's resources. But that's not what happened here, because the Speaker of the House is the Speaker of the House, whatever the circumstances, wherever he is, however he's dressed. But when he did this, specifically in the full regalia of his non-partisan role in the office of the Speaker of the House of Commons, Mr. Speaker, well, that was a partisan act coming from someone who's expected to be extremely non-partisan. Mr. Speaker, I think it's important. I think it's still important to explain this to all Francophones who are watching what happens here. It's important to remind everyone that the procedure and customs of the House of Commons are very clear, crystal clear, on the role of the Speaker of the House of Commons and on his functions.
Of order, the honourable member for Kitchener Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to reiterate this is a really important point of privilege being raised. We do have live translation, though, of all House proceedings. I believe we've heard from several members of the Conservative Party on this point. To your point earlier, I understand we're looking to get new information on this point of privilege, and I wonder if you could speak to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. When hearing members, the chair is interested in hearing the facts and explanatory arguments on an issue. Pertinent and new information is welcome, but should be understood not to be understood and not to be intended to allow members to continuously take on interventions. And I am getting close to a point where I can go back and make a determination of how to proceed on this particular issue. As I said before, when I took on the job as Deputy Speaker, I asked my predecessor, Bruce Stanton, is it a tough job? Will I be making any decisions? He said, no, it's the easiest thing you'll ever have to do. This is the second time I'm before having to make a decision in this respect. So I do want to hear the facts as they come forward, but try to stick to the facts as we possibly can.
Try to stick to the salient points, because I know there are two other people who are interested in making some arguments and presenting some facts, but I think I'm almost at the point now where I can make a ruling. The honourable member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, I understand that, but I thought it was important, very important, for all French speakers to be able to hear directly from a member what the facts were, what happened, what articles were published in the English language media. I'll just continue with a few. I'll try to speed up a bit, Mr. Speaker, but some of the procedures and customs of the House of Commons, procedures and practice. It says the Speaker has their authority and must at all times display clear impartiality to inspire the confidence and support of the House. So there's a new fact that's been added. There's a political party here in the House of Commons that has called on the Speaker to resign. That's a new fact that wasn't there when this question of privilege was first raised by my colleague, the member for Regina Capel. And continuing on, the Speaker is expected to refrain from participating in any partisan activities. That's what the House of Commons procedure and practice says. So in order to speed up, I'll just wrap up here, Mr. Speaker. Participating, the Speaker of the House of Commons participating in a Liberal Party activity, whether it's federal or provincial, or even municipal, if there were any liberal municipal activities. It's just unacceptable for the person who's supposed to be the arbitrator or the referee of debate here in the House of Commons. And so for all these reasons, Mr. Speaker, I would encourage you to rule in favor of the question of privilege raised by the member for Regina Capel. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank you for the intervention.
Make sure we stick very much to the points being brought forward to make sure that they're new points, and if they are just repeating, I'm going to maybe shut off and go to the next person so that we can move on to, I believe there's another couple of points of order to come after, so I just want to make sure that we be as judicious as possible with the time of this House. The Honourable Member for Saskatoon University.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. December 4th, 2023. This date will be quoted in future rulings and references to this House, unfortunately, Deputy Speaker. This is a date that I enter into this point of privilege debate as not willingly, but obviously all members in this House, this is a significant shot to our democracy, Deputy Speaker. And I won't go over the other points that members have raised about the ethic violation and conflict of interest decisions that have been ruled against this individual, but I will talk about my experience. Deputy Speaker, you may know this, and maybe some others in this chamber, this might be new to them, is that I was honored to be the 25th Speaker of the Saskatchewan Legislature before coming here. And I'll speak a little bit about my experience as Speaker of the Saskatchewan Legislature, and then how I found myself out here. And I think it's important to really break down the role of Speaker and how I best describe it, because as we all go and speak to different school groups and different people comes for tours of either legislatures or the House of Commons, we all obviously have some of the same questions. Like if they sit in on question period, they'll obviously have some questions afterwards. Why didn't the government answer this, or why did this happen? And I think back to when I was Speaker.
And a point of order from the Honourable Member for Timmins James Bay.
Well, Speaker, this is all fascinating, but you did rule about staying focused. We don't need a history of people visiting the legislature. We need to know whether this or not was a breach of the House.
Yeah, no, I thank the Honourable Member for that intervention. And I know, knowing that there's a number of other speakers also on this one, I'm going to ask the Honourable Member to maybe shorten up the history lesson. I know he was a great speaker of the House in Saskatchewan, so I do want him to get to his point. The Honourable Member for Saskatoon University.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I will make my remarks as short as possible, but it's important because it boils down what the issue is here today, is that when we explain what we do here and how the Westminster democracy is supposed to work is through vigorous debate, we get to arrive at a conclusion and an answer to the questions that face our country. And how that debate is administered is through the impartial position of Speaker. It's why the Speaker has a distinctive look, a look that is different than other members. They have a uniform that identifies themselves as something different in this place. That is why pages have a uniform. That's why the officers at the table have they are wearing their robes to signify how much different they need to act. They need to be that impartial ruler of our proceedings. And that is why, one of the reasons why you wear the robes, why you have that uniform, why when school groups come in and you explain the process of debates and how the Speaker rises, everyone is to zip it, or they should zip it. The respect that we have for whoever he or she is in that position. And what we've witnessed here over the weekend is I don't know how one would explain to a school group on the next visit to this place how one is impartial if they've taken part in a political partisan event. That is wrong, Deputy Speaker. Everyone knows this is wrong. The pages that we talked about how this individual was a page at one time. There is a parliamentary tradition of a little bit of trying to encourage a page to take a side or give an opinion. And I've been elected for 2 terms provincially and 2 terms federally, and I have not been able to get one impartial, one partisan answer from any clerk or any page in both legislature and the House of Commons, because they take it this seriously. When they go through the training, they know that not to partake in partisan activity because of the importance of their role. And for our Speaker to have this lapse in judgment, to throw away all hundreds of years of tradition to take part in a political event blows my mind. And I'll get to some new remarks on how I got to this location. Is that, Mr. Speaker, as I was serving as the 25th Speaker of Saskatchewan, my country was hurting. The direction of Canada was obviously taking us down a dark, dark path, and as early as 2018 we could see this. And this is where
I still have a point of order from the Honourable Timmins James Bay.
We're hearing about his personal political journey. That this is a filibuster. Can we just stay to the point?
We have a point of order on the same point. The Honourable Government House, or the House Leader for the Opposition.
I know the NDP doesn't like anything to get in the way of the Liberal agenda, but this is not a filibuster, Mr. Speaker. This is discussing and debating the actions of the Speaker. Nobody went home to their ridings Friday expecting this to happen. The Speaker chose to do this and has put the House in this situation. This is a big deal. This is such a big deal that when the House doesn't have a Speaker through resignation or anything, that...
Okay, very good. The Honourable Member for Kitchener Centre.
The fact is, the remarks we just heard were literally the history of that member's time getting to this House of Commons, had nothing to do with what was meant to be spoken about on the floor of this House, and I share the concern from other members. And I would like to see how we get to closure on this to continue the business of the House.
We are really getting into the weeds, I believe. I just want to make sure that we get to the issue that's before us, the point of privilege is before us, and just to give the heads up to the House that there are a couple of other points of privilege that have to be raised today. So I just want to make sure we can move clearly through the next couple of stages to make sure that we have the information available so that I can render a decision. The House Leader for the Opposition.
Yeah, just very briefly in response to the Green Party's latest intervention, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we're talking about judgment. It's not that there is a specific line in the standing orders that we're debating. So it's incredibly important that we hear the context from other members' experiences from other parliaments, because it is in that context that we can determine as a House whether or not a grave error in judgment was made by the Speaker.
Right.
Intervention. On the same point of order, the Honourable Member for Sherwood Park, Saskatchewan.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just on the point of order, my understanding is that we have 3, maybe there's more that I'm not aware of, but that we have 3 former speakers that are in this chamber. The member for Regina Capel, the member from Temiskaming, Nipissing, something like that, and the member who is speaking. And I do think it's important to hear from those members who have specific expertise in terms of the role of the Speaker, who have been speakers. They understand the pressures on them far more than I do, who have fortunately never had to take off my partisan colors for any reason. So I think I want to hear what the member's experience is and what he has to say.
That's right.
I think the Honourable Member for Bell River Crowfoot also has a quick comment.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I think that it is incredibly disappointing that there are other parties that would suggest that a Speaker's history and the understanding of the rules of this place and the essential elements that allows for us to be able to do our job.
Okay, well, let's not get into that. I just need to remind members the focus should be to demonstrate if there's sufficient evidence of a prima facie case and stick to those particular points. And if we have no further points to make on this particular one, I would say that we can move on to the next speaker. I'll ask the member for Saskatoon University to maybe finish up for us, and because I know I have a couple other people that are interested to speak to this as well.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And this is the context that my colleagues were talking about. So I was the 25th Speaker of the Saskatchewan Legislature, and I resigned. Why did I resign? Is to take part in a partisan event, a partisan meeting that I could not attend because I was a Speaker. That is the point. That is the point that we should all be asking ourselves. Why would a Speaker, knowing the rules, knowing the referee, being that subject expert on the rules, not see the conflict of attending a partisan event? For myself, I was relatively new, as in I only served one term before becoming Speaker, but in the tradition of this place is that we elect someone that has served many terms or had shown a great grasp on the procedure and the traditions of this place, so that we do not find ourselves in the situation that we find today.
Hear, hear.
December 4th, 2023 is a date that will be repeated in this place, because I feel that it is so important to have the respect of an impartial Speaker, that all else does not matter in this place unless that Speaker is impartial.
He should resign.
Thank you.
I thank the honourable member for getting to the point. The honourable House Leader for the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I will be very brief. I just want to again reference the statement that the Speaker made today. He said, "I would like to reassure members that the principles of respect, impartiality, and decorum are values I continue to prioritize for my tenure as Speaker." Those aren't things that you just say. Those are things you actually have to do. And what I would ask you to consider is, should you not agree that this rises to the level of requiring a privileged motion, what you will then be doing is saying that it's okay. It's okay for speakers to engage in these types of partisan activities. I don't want to see that the special way the speaker conducts himself or herself start to be eroded because of the actions that happen on this weekend if the House does not take a decision on this.
Okay, I do believe I do have enough to render to at least bring this back. I know the honourable House Leader for the NDP is reserving some time to come back, so I want to make sure that I have the opportunity to hear from the honourable member. So I'm going to urge the next two speakers to keep to the point, to make sure that they're trying to make this into a prima facie case, to stick to the information and not to all of the other points that some other members have been making. The honourable member for Sherwood Park for Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I did want to address this question of privilege and speak to the international role of the Speaker, which I don't think has been raised by other members. The Speaker does not. The primary role of the Speaker, of course, is to preside over this chamber, and impartiality is crucial in his work in that regard. But the Speaker also represents this chamber in various fora in terms of international work, in terms of Canadian diplomacy around the world, and the parliamentary website specifically identifies the role of the Speaker in terms of international work and diplomatic functions. Just this year, it was a previous Speaker, but he has made numerous international trips at the end of June, a trip to Italy and the Holy See in April, a trip to Denmark and Sweden in March, a trip to Argentina and Chile, for example. The Speaker's impartiality is crucial for their role in international diplomacy and in their work around education and modeling democracy, in some cases in countries where there are struggles in terms of democracy, where institutions are more vulnerable to capture and to other kinds of pressures and problems. And the reality and the presentation of impartiality are critical for a Speaker's work representing this chamber diplomatically, seeking to promote democracy, and I hope that is taken into consideration as well as you evaluate the question of privilege. The Speaker's role internally, as well as the Speaker's role externally, speaking on behalf of members, on behalf of the House. And I think, frankly, it's a grave scandal that we would have a speaker giving the appearance of active partisanship while in his or her position, because that member subsequently will be expected to travel to other countries to speak about our institutions, and in fact to make the case in more troubled contexts for the importance of impartial institutions, the importance of having independent election authorities, officers of parliament, etc. And if the speaker is compromised in terms of their perception, the perception of their authentic impartiality, if they're compromised in that perception domestically, it becomes very challenging for that speaker to fulfill their function internationally. So it's a critical issue for Canadian democracy, for our own ability to represent our constituents here in Canada. But it is also a pressing and important issue in terms of the projection and promotion of our values around the world. So again, I would just encourage you to take this element of the question into consideration as you prepare for your ruling.
Thank the honourable member for that intervention. I think the honourable member for Saskatoon University has a clarification. I'm going to say very quick clarification.
Yes.
Go.
Yes, Deputy Speaker. Clarification. I was rushed by the NDP Liberal Coalition here, cover-up guys that would, on my last statement about the
honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Speaker, what we're seeing here is it's a serious question, not this, he's just throwing out this partisan junk. The question was, he was not talking about this question at hand, and as Speaker, you have an obligation to make sure that this isn't descending into partisanship, but we're actually dealing with something very serious, which is the contempt of the House, potentially by the Speaker. So I'd ask you to keep this on focus rather than allowing the Conservatives just to play games.
Trying my best to stick to the facts so that this can come forward. Will the member for Saskatoon University just give the clarification that he wants to give, please?
Yes. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. So when I resigned as Speaker, that was before taking part in a partisan meeting, not after. It wasn't that I got caught being on the video screen at a national event for a partisan party. It was to take part in a nomination to be here, to take part in a federal nomination. I could not take part in that partisan activity with that hat on.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for the clarification. The honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I rise, and it's troubling that we're forced to have this discussion in this place, because I think that it speaks to, and I will reference another privileged discussion that I observed a number of years ago under a previous speaker, under a previous government. And the reason I reference it will become very apparent shortly. But Mr. Speaker, it happened to be a discussion. It was actually an NDP member at the time, when they were in the opposition benches as the official opposition, and former Prime Minister Stephen Harper and the then Conservative government. There was a discussion about the privileges of a member being violated because the security guards did not allow ease of access to the chamber in the old centre block, which of course is a little bit different circumstances than we are in now. But there was an extended discussion that took place about this particular NDP member's ability to access the House of Commons, and in the likelihood that that ability was hindered in any way, that would have been a violation of that member's privilege. A privilege that is guarded so dearly. And for most watching, they would see the idea of a question of privilege and probably have many questions about what is the big deal. But when it comes to the privileges we have in this place, they are so carefully guarded, because that is by the mechanism for which we are able to represent the people that send us here and perform the sacred duties that we are. So, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the discussion that took place on that that question of privilege, for a few moments that an NDP member was not able to enter this place in a timely manner, which could have led to her not being able to perform her duties. There's a direct correlation to the discussion that we're having here today, because
the honourable member for London Fanshawe, I believe, on a point of order.
I think you know what I'm going to say, Mr. Speaker. You have already ruled on this. You have asked for this debate to end and for us to continue on with business as is supposed to come before the House. So I would ask that happen now.
I will caution the honourable member to really get to the point, because there are a number of things I want to get moving on here. We're already an hour, or a little over an hour into this point of privilege. I do want to give it its due time, but I also want to be able to take it back to make a decision to be able to render back to the House as soon as possible as Deputy Speaker. The honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I find it interesting, and not very often will I defend the NDP whatsoever. But Chair, the fact that the NDP would be opposed to the example to which gets to the very heart of what we are discussing. Now, in that case, it was the physical.
Honourable member for Timmins James Bay, and I know what I know what you're going to say, and it's about making the point. I did ask the honourable member to make a point. The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
We want to hear a ruling. This is a serious issue. What I'm seeing, though, is it's like allowing a free pass to just take shots, partisan shots that are needless, Speaker. So if we're going to have a chamber that does the job of dealing with something as serious as this, I want to hear a ruling. I don't need to see this descend into this kind of partisan gamesmanship. So, Speaker, I'm asking you to put the proper focus here.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order from the honourable member. I'm going to go to the honourable member for Edmonton-Wetaskiwin.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, on that point of order, the NDP members have stood up multiple times now just giving cover to the government. At this point in time, we don't actually know what the NDP position is. We know what the position of two of the parties are on this serious issue, but we don't even know what the NDP position is. Perhaps the honourable member, next time he stands up, can shed some light on whether the NDP is just going to continue to cover the Liberal government.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna chop off and go to the next individual that wants, and I do. We're down to our the last speakers on this particular one, because I do want to cut this off, because I am fully aware of the time is going by. The honourable member for Selkirk Interlake Eastman has a comment.
Yeah, on this question of privilege, I just wanted to provide some extra information, because like everyone else, I was shocked when I saw the Speaker in his robes addressing a leadership convention. And so I just wanted to look at the use of House of Commons resources as described under the bylaws of the Board of Internal Economy. And under parliamentary functions, Clause 4, subsection 1, it says, the funds, goods, services, and premises provided by the House of Commons to a member under the Parliament of Canada Act, this bylaw or any other bylaw made under the Act may only be used for carrying out the member's parliamentary functions. Wow. Then it goes on to say partisan activities, subclause 2. The funds, goods, services, and premises provided by the House of Commons to a member may be used by the member for partisan activities only if those activities fall within the parliamentary functions of the member. And then it goes on to say not parliamentary functions in section 3. For greater certainty, the following activities when performed by a member are not parliamentary functions. Clause B then goes on to say activities related to the administration, organization, internal communications of a political party, including participation in a party leadership campaign or convention, solicitations of contributions, and solicitations of memberships to a political party. Wow. So, and it goes on to precision. For greater certainty, a member's parliamentary or constituency office shall not be used as a meeting or organizational location in relation to any of these activities referred to in subsection 3. So, Mr. Speaker, this is very clear that all of us are prohibited from using our House of Commons resources, including our staff, including our premises and being our offices, for any partisan activity. And here we have the Speaker himself using his office, dressed in his House of Commons Speaker robes, addressing a Liberal provincial leadership election. And Mr. Speaker, that is, in my case, and I lose complete faith and trust in this Speaker for violating the rules that he is supposed to enforce himself.
I see the honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot. Maybe the honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the intervention by my colleague from Manitoba. But, Mr. Chair, I would simply say this when it comes to the role that partisanship does play in this House, because I of course, among many others, are known for their partisanship. But, Mr. Speaker, I do find it troubling that there would be members of this place that would use a debate that is about defending the rights and privileges of members to be able to represent their constituents, including when that partisanship when that partisanship takes place, Mr. Speaker, which is why I very carefully selected the example I did about a NDP opposition member's ability to access the chamber. So if I could, Mr. Speaker, just make that quick connection to the debate that we are having here today. Whether it is a member's physical ability to access this place, I know all members, if they look on the back of their ID, they see the very clear rules of privileges and what parliamentary privilege means in terms of accessing the parliamentary precinct. But, Mr. Speaker, that goes beyond simply the physical ability for us to walk into this chamber. It needs to ensure that members are able to, in an uninhibited fashion, be able to trust the institutions and infrastructure of this place, including the role of the Speaker as the arbiter and a non-partisan voice that does not take preference over one another's. And, Mr. Speaker, to sum up this very, very quickly, the actions of the Speaker have called into question whether or not myself or any other member of this place can truly trust the actions of the Chair to ensure that the role of the Speaker and the sacred obligation that has within our parliamentary system is maintained. Because without that, Mr. Speaker, it devolves into something that truly does abuse our privileges.
Okay. The honourable member for Selkirk Interlake Eastman.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, just add in on the bylaws. I should also draw your attention to Section 7, which says, except as may be approved by the board and subject to subsection 2, a member may not use funds, goods, services, and premises provided by the House of Commons for the benefit of any person, association, or organization, or for the promotion of a product, service, or event of any person, association, or organization. This is very clear, Mr. Speaker, that when the Speaker addressed the Liberal Convention just this past weekend, that it was to the benefit of a third party, and there needs to be actions taken to reprimand that from ever happening again.
Okay, I thank the members for their interventions on this one. I believe I have enough to go back and look at. I'm going to come back to the House on this one. There is a fair amount of information to look at, and it is incumbent upon me to come back as quickly as possible on this particular point. Now, I believe I have a couple other points of privilege that are coming forward. So on a new issue, the Honourable House Leader for the Opposition.
Yes, this is a new issue, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I am rising on a point of order pursuant to Standing Order 69.1 to ask that you treat Bill C-59, an act to implement certain provisions of the fall economic...
Because we do have two other points of privilege, so I'd like to get those out of the way before I go to the point of order. I apologize. Okay. On a point of personal privilege, I think we have the honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful for the opportunity, although grieved by the necessity of raising this. You'll bear with me. I'm just pulling together my notes here. Okay, Mr. Speaker, I am rising to draw the attention of the House to a violation of my privileges and the privileges of other members that relates to the provisions of Standing Order 116, which I'll briefly read. This pertains to the work of committees. It says that in a standing, special, or legislative committee, the standing order shall apply so far as may be applicable, except the standing orders as the election of speaker, seconding of motions, limiting the number of times of speaking and the length of speeches. And the end of debate, this is the crucial point 2A and B, unless a time limit has been adopted by the committee or by the House, the chair of a standing, special, or legislative committee may not bring a debate to an end while there are members present who still wish to participate. A notice of the decision of the chair in this regard may not be subject to an appeal to the committee. And B, that a violation of paragraph A of this section may be brought to the attention of the Speaker by any member, and the Speaker shall have the power to rule in the matter. If, in the opinion of the Speaker, such violation has occurred, the Speaker may order that all subsequent proceedings in relation to the said violation be nullified. So, Mr. Speaker, I am taking advantage of the new opportunity this provision offers members to bring to the attention of the Speaker violations of privilege that have occurred in committee, in particular in this case the Natural Resource Committee. Of course, historically, it was not the case that such violations could be brought to the attention of the chair, but we have new rules that fortunately, I think, in this context at least, they provide us with an opportunity to bring the absolutely egregious behavior of the member for Calgary Skyview, the chair of the Natural Resources Committee, to the attention of the chair and seek an appropriate remedy. On multiple occasions, the member for Calgary Skyview, who is the chair of the Natural Resource Committee, showed flagrant disregard for the rules and the rights of members in limiting the ability of members to speak, in arbitrarily imposing time limits, in depriving members of the floor when they had the floor, in reassigning the floor when one member had the floor, taking the floor away from them and reassigning it to another member. And these all had the effect.
Point of order from the honourable member of Timmins James Bay.
Well, we know the Conservatives are trying to talk the clock out, but Mr. Speaker, if there is a question of privilege from a committee, it has to be brought from the committee. This man did not have that support, so he's trying to overrule the chair of committee who made a ruling. So, Speaker, it's up to you then to decide whether you're going to overrule the chair of a committee that had that this was brought forward and had the support of the majority of committee. It would set a very bad precedent for the Speaker to allow that member to override a committee chair, and I don't think that that's within our rules.
The honourable member for Sherwood Park, Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, the member said that was a point of order. He was actually, I think, making arguments regarding the question of privilege, which he will have an opportunity to do. He is, as you might have gathered, intimately involved in these proceedings, and I'm sure will have a great deal to say about it. Mr. Chair, I did begin my remarks, which maybe the member for Timmins James Bay was not listening to, in which I mentioned, though, that I'm speaking in the context of the provisions of Standing Order 116(2)A and B, provisions which, by the way, I mentioned in the discussion at committee. The member may or may not recall that during some of the back and forth at the Natural Resources Committee, I informed the chair and the member for Timmins James Bay and other members that they should be careful about whether or not they respect the rules and the rights and privileges of members, because unlike was the case in the past, there is now a provision in the standing orders whereby members can seek a remedy in the House. So the member would be right most of the time, but he should have heeded my warnings in this case, because again, Standing Order 116(2)A and B, I read them to him in the committee and to other members, and I have read them in the House again, which do speak to my right to highlight violations of privilege. But look, if the member wants to speak to this issue later, he can. I, of course, think this is an extremely important issue of privilege, and we do see the complicity of the NDP, in fact, in some cases, the NDP being worse than the government in trying to shut down members of Parliament, deprive them of their rights to speak. And I think workers in that member's riding and across the country will take note of that. Mr. Chair, I would like to provide you with the evidence that I'm speaking of in terms of how Standing Order 116(2)A and B was violated in the proceedings of the Natural Resources Committee. It was violated a number of ways. The first instance of such violation was when the member for Peace River Westlock was seeking to be added to the Speaker's list and was in fact arbitrarily prevented from doing so. The committee rules allow any member who is present, even if they are not a regular member of the committee or subbed in, to be able to participate in the proceedings of the committee with certain limited exceptions. They can't vote. They can't. They can't vote, but they can participate, speak, etc. And this was an instance. I'll draw the attention to the House of when this happened, when at 3:50 on October the 31st. Excuse me, October the 31st. This was a continuation of the meeting of the Natural Resources Committee that began on October the 1st. Mr. Viersen had been seeking to have himself added to the list, and he said. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. This will be challenged because I need to cite some evidence from the transcript, and I know in committees it's our convention to use surnames, and of course in the House we don't use surnames. So I will do my best to, in every case, switch it over. But I apologize for my error previously, and I apologize in advance if I err again. But I'll do my best. So, the member for Peace River Westlock the member for Timmins James Bay is very keen to get into this conversation, and frankly, I'm sure he's embarrassed right now because his conduct at committee was
order. Let's stick to the facts of the points that we're trying to make, and let's try not to take partisan shots at parties as we roll along. I am hearing a lot of chatter when we go on, but I'm also hearing attacks happening as well. So let's just stick to the point of privilege that we're trying to make, and try to use the time of the House as judiciously as possible. The honourable member for Timmins James Bay, I believe, on a point of order.
Yes, sir, Speaker. I just wanted to be clear. We know that if the Conservatives talk the clock to 1:30, that the House would not be able to proceed with the business at hand. So I was just asking to see the clock at 1:30, Speaker, so we didn't have to waste any more time. And
the honourable member for Sarnia-Lambton, I believe, has a point of order as well.
Mr. Speaker, we have had continuous interruptions and harassment from the minister from the member from James Bay while we're trying to, talk about a serious point of privilege. I'm beginning to think that my privilege to listen to the member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, is being infringed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the interventions. I will once again remind members of this House of Commons to keep their comments to themselves if they possibly can, and so that we can judiciously get through the points of personal privilege that have been brought forward and brought to the attention of the Speaker's office in accordance to the rules that were put forward. The honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, and I will urge the honourable member to continue to make his point.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I certainly will, hopefully without interruptions, and I share the outrage of the member for Sarnia-Lambton, although she should review some of the transcripts of Natural Resources to realize how bad it can sometimes get with the member for Timmins James Bay. In any event, I was sharing the evidence from October 31st. This was at 3:50, and the chair said, "I'd like to remind members that the member for Peace River Westlock is not a substitute member of the committee, so I cannot acknowledge he can sit at the table." And then the chair says, when he does, we will, once the sub happens right now, we will go the floor to the member for Cypress Hills Grasslands, and the member for Cypress Hills Grasslands points out the member for Peace River Westlock wants to join this debate, even as not one of the 4 voting Conservative members on this committee. He can do that. He's fully within his rights to do that. If one of the independent members or a member from the Green...
We have a point of order from the Honourable House, the Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do believe that the member is out of order in terms of bringing forward his matter of privilege. There is no committee report before the House to be able to raise the issue that he is in fact raising. Some might believe the member's trying to filibuster.
I again will urge everyone to stick to the points to make the prima facie case that they're trying to make, that it is a question of privilege. I think the honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot has a point of order.
Yes, on that point of order, Mr. Speaker, I would just reference to the House to ensure that we're following the rules in this place, which is the reason why there are so many issues here today. That this is the 2017 third edition of Bosch and Gagnon. It references regarding question of privilege, and I quote, Mr. Speaker, that whenever any matter of privilege arises, it shall be taken into consideration immediately. So, Mr. Speaker, I find it very troubling that the Liberals and specifically their coalition partners in the NDP.
Okay, well, I will use my line here, and I need to make people aware of when bringing a point of privilege to this floor that the role of the chair is to decide whether the matter merits priority over all other business. In making their preliminary arguments, members should briefly explain the background and the main facts that give rise to the question of privilege. The focus should be to demonstrate that there is sufficient evidence of a prima facie case. And so I will ask the honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan to make the case that this is actually a point, or we'll have to move on. The honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do appreciate the point that that privilege has priority in this House. That the standing orders do provide that when there is an issue at committee that involves the rights of members to speak, the ability of them to not be interrupted, or the imposition of time limits and contravention of of the rules or the orders adopted by that committee, that is an issue that can be brought to the House. And this is a new standing order. Standing Order 16-2A and B. It's new material in the standing orders. So member for Winnipeg North and other members may not be familiar with it. It doesn't have, of course, the same history as other provisions because it's new. But again, this was clearly a violation of privilege. It clearly violated the privileges of members. It is being brought to the House because Standing Order 116 specifically invites members to bring such matters to the House. And there were multiple instances, in fact, where the member for Calgary Skyview limited the ability of members to speak, interrupted them, stopped them from being able to move forward. So, Mr. Chair, I will go through those examples for your consideration and then look forward to your ruling after that. So the member for Cypress Hills Grasslands highlighted that in his view, the member for Peace River West Loch should be able to join the debate. This was on October the 31st at 3:30. He said if one of the independent members or member from the Green Party were to walk in and sit down at the table, they'd be able to join the debate. This is a debate on a motion. It's not a substantive part of committee work right now. We're debating a motion, and they'd be able to join the debate. There was various back and forth among members about whether or not a member who is not subbed in can still participate in the debate on the motion. And as you know, Speaker, it's long established, and I think consistent with Standing Order 116 on the application of the general rules of the House to committees, that a member should be able to speak as part of a motion regardless of whether or not they are subbed in. The chair ruled against the ability of members to do that, and as such, I raised a question of privilege on this matter in committee, and I draw your attention to about the 4:20 to 4:25 mark on October the 31st. This was when I was given the speaking list, and this speaks to the second issue of limiting time. I was given the floor to speak by the chair following a request from the member for Lakeland about what the nature of the speaking order was, and it was at that time that I sought to move a matter of privilege with respect to the operations of the committee. So the member for Lakeland said, Chair, just so we can have confidence, can you review the speaking list? And subsequently, the chair says that the speaking list is myself, member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, and then the member for Timmins, James Bay. So at 4:25 on October the 31st, I was able to take the
point of order from the honourable member for Kitchener Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am here in the House of Commons today to try to make progress on the priorities of my constituents. I understand this is a very serious point of privilege. I've attempted for the last 5 minutes to listen to what the member for Sherwood Park, Saskatchewan, is saying and try to understand how it relates to the original point of privilege being raised, and I can't see it. Mr. Speaker, can you help me understand the connection between what's being shared right now and the original point of privilege, which was raised an hour and 35 minutes ago?
The honourable, this is a whole other. This is on a committee point of privilege. I am looking at the honourable member and hoping that he can make his point quickly enough, because we do have a couple of other things that we would like to do before question period. So the honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There have been a number of matters that happen at Natural Resources Committee, so I'm going through them, but I think it's important to say that there were multiple instances and multiple different ways in which the chair violated the privileges of members in violation of Standing Order 116. And just to clarify for my esteemed colleague...
We have a point of order from the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, you know, the House of Commons has 20-some standing committees, and there's all sorts of things that take place in the standing communities. My concern is, Mr. Speaker, is that the member is trying to attempt to set a precedence here by bringing something when there is no report that has come from the standing committee. So this could be used as a potential tool going forward, Mr. Speaker, which would be very destructive to the discussions and the debates that should be taking place in the chamber. I would ask, Mr. Speaker, that you have the member get right to the point. It shouldn't be taking 15, 20 minutes. Maybe he can try to curtail it to 2 or 3 3 minutes so that we can get on to what I understand is yet another matter of privilege and then another point of order from the Conservative Party.
I believe the point of order from the Honourable Member Sarnia Lambton on the same point.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very concerned that the member opposite that just spoke is not taking seriously that members were not allowed to speak at committee and that the committee chair ignored the whole situation, and that's why it had to be brought here to the House. Hopefully we can come to a quick resolution. Perhaps the member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan could table all the different examples for your review, sir.
I would appreciate maybe having a conversation with the honourable member afterwards to get to the specific points. But I would hope that the honourable member would get specifically to the accusations that he has and what the remedy might be on this particular one, knowing full well that we have a couple other points of privilege that we would like to get to as well. So the honourable member for Sherwood Park, Saskatchewan, please get to the point of the point.
Thank you, Chair. I'm doing my best, but constantly interrupted. Yeah. Standing Order 116 directs us to bring these matters to the attention of the House. The member for Winnipeg North, I believe, supported the addition of 116 to A and B. This was a proposal from the previous government House leader, I believe. So. He can propose further changes to the standing orders if he doesn't believe that members should be able to bring these matters to the House. Here's what happened at 4:25 on October the 31st at the Natural Resources Committee. I began to speak. I was given the floor. The chair said, I'm going to ask all members. We have Mr. myself and then the member for Timmins James Bay, and I began to speak. And at the time, I said I would seek to move a privilege motion at committee regarding the breach of privilege for the member for Peace River Westlock. I said that he had the chair had breached his privileges by refusing to allow him to speak on Bill C-69. So I would ask you, Chair, to review the record regarding the breach of privilege as it pertains to the member for Peace River Westlock. But this is not the only instance, because at 4:25 on October 31st, I took the floor and spoke to the matter of privilege. There were various repeated interruptions as I sought to make the argument, and I nonetheless continued to make the argument in the midst of those various efforts to silence those arguments regarding privilege. The chair did not, at the time, issue a specific ruling about whether or not this was, in his view, a matter pertaining to privilege. As members know, that if you raise a question of privilege at committee, the chair will then make a determination if he sees it as being a matter relating to privilege, and then if he deems it to be so, then a debate ensues on privilege. The chair didn't specifically say that he considered it a matter pertaining to privilege, although my understanding at the time was that it was a matter pertaining to privilege, and he had deemed it so because he allowed the debate to continue. Again, I go to just 5:05, the chair saying again, the member for Calgary Skyview saying, yes, you have the floor, Mr. Name, where you left off. The name was mine. I can't, of course, say it in the House. And then I continued at that point. I continued, and the debate continued. Actually, it continued through till the end of the session of the meeting on October 31st, and then it resumed. The same meeting of the Natural Resources Committee resumed on November the 1st. I still had the floor. And then the chair says, when we concluded the last meeting, he said to me, you had the floor, so I want to provide you the opportunity. Would you like to cede the floor, or would you like to continue? And I said, Mr. Chair, upon serious reflection of the matter, I have decided I would like to keep the floor because I have more to say. I will now do so. And thus, I continued on the point. This is on November the 1st. Now, subsequently, the chair, though, I gather, having maybe learned some rules that he hadn't previously been aware of, which there are a good many. He said subsequently in that meeting, this was much later.
Could I maybe, because I know the committee has been in this debate since I believe the 30th of October, the day before my birthday, including my birthday and a whole bunch after it. So I just wanted to say, we're going to read all of the account of what's happening in there. I think it'd be best that I can go back and read through the Hansard on that one. So I just wonder maybe the honourable member could to get to what the remedy is going to be, what his request is for this point of privilege.
Thank you, Chair. So I will skip forward just to give the highlights here. The chair then retroactively ruled that the matter that we had been discussing for more than a day was in fact no longer a question of privilege. He said, given that the committees are empowered to limit the participation of non-members, it is my opinion that the objections raised by the member constitute a point of order and do not touch on parliamentary privilege. Therefore, he prevented me from moving the privilege motion. And I didn't agree with his...
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Government House Leader, on a point of privilege, or point of...
Mr. Speaker, this is somewhat becoming laughable and very serious in terms of at the same time. The Speaker has just asked the member to point out a remedy. Everything that he's quoting is already in Hansard. The Speaker can actually reference that. Mr. Speaker, I would ask that he listen to his last instruction from you and get to the point of the matter as opposed to continuing with a filibuster on the floor of the House.
I wouldn't say it's rare that I agree with the honourable member, but I do agree with the honourable member on this particular case. That I do know that there's a couple of other things that we do need to hit. I think the honourable member for St. Albert Edmonton has a point as well that we would like to address as well. So, and I think the honourable member for Selkirk Eastman has a comment on a previous point. So I am going to ask the honourable member to get to the remedy or how he wants this remedy. The honourable member for Sherwood Park for Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, if this is the wish of the House, then I would simply commend to you, the Speaker, the reading of all of the blues that came from the Natural Resources Committee. The point is, and I won't cite the evidence then if the Speaker's not interested in hearing the evidence. I thought it might in fact save time and long.
Order. It's not that I'm not interested in hearing the evidence. Is that I know there's a lot of evidence there. So if the honourable member was going to quote all of the evidence, we would be here until next Thursday. So I really don't want that. I am responsible to the honourable members and the order that we have, the agenda that we're trying to keep. So the honourable member for Sherwood Park for Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The point is, the floor was taken away from me. The point is, I had the floor. I had tried to raise a question of privilege, which the chair said I couldn't. I didn't agree with that, but whatever. I mean, not whatever. That's one issue in terms of privilege. But secondarily, the chair then said, okay, now we're going to go to the member for Timmins, James Bay, and give him the floor. You certainly cannot, as chair, in the middle of a meeting, in the middle of a member speaking, when the member has not, in fact, moved any motion. I tried to move a motion, but I wasn't able to move a motion. The chair cannot simply take the floor away from a member who has the floor, who achieved it through proper means, who the chair recognized on multiple occasions as having the floor. The chair cannot simply take the floor away from that member and decide to give it to the next member on the list. That is very clearly imposing a time limit contrary to Standing Order 116. So we saw in this instance multiple instances of the violation of the privileges of members through the limiting of their ability to speak. In one case involving the member for Peace River Westlock not being able to put his name on the list, and the Speaker and the Chair at that time not considering it a matter pertaining to privilege, even though it clearly was a matter pertaining to privilege. And then secondly, the fact that when I had the floor, the Chair took the floor away from me. So members, the Chair can review the evidence and see all that. I will raise a final issue, which is that the member for Timmins, James Bay, used clearly unparliamentary language in committee, accusing members of lying. This was brought to the attention of the Chair, and the Chair ruled that under those circumstances it was perfectly fine for the member for Timmins, James Bay to use that kind of unparliamentary language. Really unprecedented that the member for Calgary Skyview as chair would hear members using clearly unparliamentary language in committee as part of members that are part of his own coalition, and that he would allow those members to use that language and persist in using that language. It's quite horrifying, I think, and it also violates the privileges of members, although maybe it's not as clear whether that's a matter that can be raised in the House and relates to Standing Order 116 2A and B, although the first 2 points very clearly do. Mr. Speaker, you had asked about the appropriate remedy for this violation of privilege. As I think there was some clear direction in Standing Order 2A and B, 116 2A and B, regarding the remedy that would be appropriate under the circumstances. The Standing Orders say again that unless a time limit has been adopted by the committee or by the House, the chair of a standing committee, a standing special or legislative committee may not bring a debate to an end while there are members present who still wish to participate. A decision of the chair in this regard may not be subject to an appeal to the committee. And then B, the crucial part, a violation of paragraph A of this section may be brought to the attention of the Speaker or by any member, and the Speaker shall have the power to rule on the matter. And then if, in the opinion of the Speaker, such violation has occurred, the Speaker may order that all subsequent proceedings in relation to the said violation be nullified. So, Mr. Speaker, the violation of privileges, various violations of privilege have occurred. These occurred in the course of debate on the motion at the Natural Resources Committee. And at a minimum, Chair, the first remedy I would suggest would be that you nullify subsequent proceedings that took place at the Natural Resources Committee, and that you restore the floor to myself so that I can continue with the remarks that I was planning on making at the time. But secondarily, Mr. Speaker, I think it is a grave problem when we have chairs of committees that show such flagrant disregard for the rules, as we have seen from the member for Calgary Skyview. And I suggest you call to order chairs of committees that allow unparliamentary language to be used in committee, that call to order chairs who violate rules, who take the floor away from some members. So in addition to the remedy specifically prescribed in Standing Order 116 2B, Chair, your posture's been ambiguous to me, Chair.
Thanks for letting me stand. Listen, I think we have enough information to go back and review this on behalf, and we'll try to come back as soon as possible on this. I mean, specifically when we look at this, to nullify, if such a violation has occurred, the Speaker may order all the subsequent proceedings in relation to the said violation to be nullified. So we do need to look closely at what has happened, and we will go back to look at that, dependent on Standing Order 116. I thank the honourable member for his intervention. We're going to go to the honourable member for St. Albert Edmonton on his point of privilege as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise on a question of privilege, having given the appropriate notice pursuant to Standing Order 48 sub 2. And the question of privilege pertains to a breach of a committee order of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs for the production of documents regarding the incident in the galleries on September 22nd, 2023, during the address of the Ukrainian president. That incident, of course, Mr. Speaker, involved the recognition by the Speaker of a former soldier of the 14th Waffen Grenadier Division of the SS. It is an incident that brought enormous shame on this House. It caused significant international embarrassment. It caused enormous hurt to Jewish Canadians and indeed Jews around the world. It showed a total lack of respect for the men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces who fought valiantly in World War II to defeat the Nazis, including 45,000 Canadians who gave their lives to secure freedom and to defeat the evil Nazis. And it demonstrated disrespect to the memory of 6 million Jews who were murdered at the hands of the Nazis during the Holocaust. This incident in the galleries constituted perhaps this Prime Minister's greatest international embarrassment in a long list of international embarrassments caused by this Prime Minister, who is himself an international embarrassment. In order to get to the bottom of this egregious incident that happened under the watch of this Prime Minister, on September 22nd, I moved a motion at the Procedure and House Affairs Committee, and I think for some context, I will read the relevant parts of that motion. That motion called for the production of documents. More specifically, at paragraph B, it's provided as follows. An order due issue for all emails, memoranda, or other documents transmitted between the Speaker's office or the House of Commons administration on the one part, and any government department or agency, including the Prime Minister's office or any other minister's office, as well as the House leaders of all recognized parties and their offices on the other part, in relation to the address of the President of Ukraine, including but not limited to reference to the name Yaroslav Hunka and the arrangements concerning it, provided that these shall be deposited with the clerk of the committee in both official languages and without redaction within 10 days. Mr. Speaker, that motion was adopted after considerable obstruction by the Liberals on the Procedure and House Affairs Committee, no doubt to shield the Prime Minister from accountability for this embarrassing incident. It was adopted nonetheless at the end of November. I don't have the date, but I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, that the 10-day period for documents to be produced, including from the Privy Council office, from the Prime Minister's office, that deadline came and went as of December 1st. Conservatives complied with the motion.
Order from the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
On a point of order, I think it's really important to recognize that there is no report from the Standing Committee. And therefore, it's questionable in terms of how it is that the member would stand up and have a privilege issue when there doesn't seem to be any issue that he could raise because it hasn't been reported on from the Standing Committee.
Okay, and hopefully, yeah, I would ask the member to report that, because if I look at speakers have consistently ruled that, except in the most extreme situations, they will hear questions of privilege arising from committee proceedings only upon presentation of a report from the committee which deals directly with the matter. So I'm on the member for St. Albert Edmonton to maybe get to that particular point so that I can rule one way or another on this one.
Well, Mr. Speaker, and to your point about exceptional circumstances, that is consistent with a ruling of Speaker Fraser on March 26, 1990. And I would submit that if there ever were an instance in which there are exceptional circumstances, it was in regards to this matter. This, after all, goes to the heart of the administration of the House and protocols that were breached, causing enormous embarrassment to all members of this House. And I would submit on that basis that the failure of the Prime Minister's office and the PCO and other relevant departments controlled by the Prime Minister to turn over documents within the 10 days is a matter that is quite appropriately raised in this House in the absence of a committee report, given the extraordinary set of circumstances that led to the commencement of this study in the first place, which I would remind you, Mr. Speaker, resulted in the resignation of the former Speaker, underscoring the degree to which this is a matter that is indeed extraordinary. Now, Mr. Speaker, before I was interrupted by the parliamentary secretary to the government House Leader, I would note that the power...
I believe the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary has another point on this.
The member still has not justified. He's talking about something in order to try to amplify as if it justifies, and that is something that's somewhat debatable at very best. There is no report. Therefore, the member should not be rising, making his case at this point.
That's right.
Once the report is actually tabled, then he would be in a much better position to be able to make his case, Mr. Speaker. And I think to let the member continue allows for or encourages the abuse of our tradition inside the House, even given a 30-year quote, 30-plus years quote, Mr. Speaker. It doesn't justify it.
Well, I'm going to give it a 20-year quote, and Speaker Milliken in 2004, in the absence of a report from the committee on as such, it is virtually impossible for the chair to make any judgment as to the prima facie occurrence of a brief or privilege with regard to such charges. So I would say to the honourable member, I would wait for the honourable member for the report to be tabled in this into this chamber and bring the point of privilege back to the floor at that time. So I'm going to move on to the next item as well. And I believe the honourable member for Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman had a comment on a previous report, I believe.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm rising today to add to the question of privilege raised by the member for St. Hyacinthe Bagot. That was done on Friday, December the 1st. This is the first opportunity for the official opposition to address it. And the member from St. Hyacinthe Bagot was talking in quite a bit of detail about the potential misleading of the House by the Minister of National Defence and the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence as it related to answers in question period. Now, Mr. Speaker, you know, intentionally misleading the House is always a grave matter, and countless speakers have ruled that it is essential to our democracy that information provided Parliament be accurate and complete. I think it's important to put on the record other examples that were found to be prima facie questions of privilege. On February 1st, 2002, the Speaker ruled on a matter in regard to the former Minister of National Defence. The honourable member for Portage Lisgar alleged that the Minister of National Defence deliberately misled the House as to when he knew that prisoners were taken by Canadian JTF-2 troops in Afghanistan and been handed over to the Americans. In support of that allegation, he cited the minister's responses in question period on 2 successive days. The Speaker considered the matter and found that there was a prima facie case of privilege. He said, "The authorities are consistent about the need for clarity in our proceedings and about the need to ensure the integrity of the information provided by the government to the House. The authorities to which Speaker Milliken was referring included, but are not limited to, the following House of Commons Practices and Procedures, 2nd edition, which states on page 115, misleading a minister or a member has always been considered a form of obstruction and thus a prima facie case of privilege." The Speaker in 2002 accepted the minister's assertion that he had no intention to mislead the House and made the following statement. Nevertheless, this remains a very difficult situation. The Speaker went on to say that on the basis of arguments presented by honourable members and in view of the gravity of the matter, Mr. Speaker, I see you're motioning to me. I will continue this after question period if you so let me, because I do have a number of other examples I wish to raise.
Continue this after question period. Statements by